Report with Sam Cedar.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Cedar.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Cedar.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Tuesday, June 2nd, 2020. My name is Sam Cedar. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live depths from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Trump threatens the country with the Insurrection Act, says he will release the military if the governors don't toughen up. Meanwhile, his defense secretary tells those same governors dominate the battle space. Protests and looting across the country. New York City extends its 8 p.m. curfew for another 5 days. Meanwhile, Justin Amash and Democrats plan legislation to end qualified immunity, to end the 1033 program, and more. Independent autopsy shows that Floyd died of asphyxiation as a function of having cops on his neck and back. Meanwhile, the Louisville mayor fires its police chief in the wake of killing an unarmed black man during the protests. The Wisconsin Supreme Court will revisit throwing 130,000 people off its voter rolls. Judges uphold vote by mail and absentee voting in Nevada and Virginia, respectively. Oh, and incidentally, there's a bunch of primaries today. Maryland, Indiana, New Mexico, Pennsylvania, Baltimore, D.C. The IRS, starved of resources, letting high-income scofflaws walk. And we still have a pandemic going on, so you'll be happy to know that Anthony Fauci hasn't talked with Donald Trump in 2 weeks. And the testing czar position in the federal government is to be eliminated. Lastly, as the Senate zeroes in on sitting the 200th new conservative federal judge, where are Pelosi and the Democrats? Vacation. Vacation. All this and more on today's program. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. We had other things scheduled for today. Maybe we'll get to them tomorrow. Maybe we'll get to them next week. But we will have those guests on. But yesterday, of course, another day of police violence, of uprising, of protests, of some looting, of Donald Trump really starting to feel comfortable, or at least it feels like there was a decision made yesterday or in the past couple of days that the best course of action for Trump is to really heighten the contradictions, I guess, right? We would say, to really promote violent polarization in the country. I mean, I don't know how else to express this. And, it is, it's depressing. It is disturbing. I think some people, frankly, are invigorated by it a little bit. Others, not so much. Count me in the not so much crowd. I don't know where we go from here, frankly. And, I got to tell you, it also extends to the show. Like I spent, 7 hours on Twitter last night. And just because of the nature of the work that we all do here, we are that type of people. And it gets, I'm sure many of you were just sitting there and absorbing as much information as possible. And it's disturbing. It's really disturbing time in the country. We are seeing some hints that maybe some lawmakers will at least be pushing certain legislation. Will it pass? Of course not. But we're starting to set some markers. New York State, the state Senate is, I've seen it described as flirting with the idea of making the police records of complaints and misconduct by police officers, making that public. And of course, the police union in New York City in particular said they will go to war over that, which I don't know, maybe they've been just practicing on the streets of New York City. But we will get into all of this today. And, I got to tell you, I've been doing this for 15 years and don't really have a great sense of how to navigate all of this. We've pushed ads for the past couple of days. We're going to do some ads today because, at one point we need to pay the bills. And it is a weird, the juxtaposition between the crap show that is going on and sort of doing anything that seems like normal is just a weird experience. And, it's been that way in many respects throughout this whole COVID-19 era. And we still have all that. The virus is still here. John Barry was helpful, I guess, in sort of saying like, it's going to be here. And we don't really have a plan on how to live with it. Maybe we get lucky. I suspect what will happen is we're going to get lucky for some period of time, and then we will get unlucky. But it is still here, and we will talk about those things. Let's just start with this. This is how yesterday basically started. Donald Trump is on the phone with governors. I haven't heard of any governors who have come out and said that was a great inspirational phone call. Someone leaked the audio. I've seen reports where, and we're going to talk obviously about the assault on protesters in Washington, D.C. to clear the way for Trump to have a photo op in front of a church, holding a Bible upside down. I don't know if he did that on purpose or just he has no idea which way the letters go. But prior to that happening, Donald Trump got on the phone with some governors and was giving them a pep talk. Let's play this.
We're strongly looking for arrests. You have to get much tougher. You're going to get overridden. I know Governor Walz is on the phone, and we spoke, and I fully agree with the way he handled it the last couple of days. I asked him to do that. Get a lot of men. We have all the men and women that you need. But people aren't calling them up. You have to dominate. If you don't dominate, you're wasting your time. They're going to run over you. You're going to look like a bunch of jerks. You have to dominate. And you have to arrest people, and you have to try people. And they have to go to jail for long periods of time. These are radicals, and they're anarchists. They are anarchists, whether you like it or not. I know some of you guys are different persuasion, and that's okay. I fully understand it. I understand both. I'm for everybody. I'm representing everybody. I'm not representing radical right, radical left. I'm representing everybody. But you have to know what you're dealing with. And it's happened before. It's happened numerous times. And the only time it's successful is when you're weak. And most of you are weak. Washington was under very good control, but we're going to have it under much more control. We're going to pull in thousands of people. And we were under guard of the D.C. police, the mayor of Washington, D.C. And Secret Service did a very good job around the White House, but their primary function is around the White House. But we're going to clamp down very, very strong. But you got to arrest people, you have to track people, you have to put them in jail for 10 years, and you'll never see this stuff again. And you have to let them know that.
Yeah, I don't know about you, but that's bat crap crazy. First of all, governors are not in charge of sentencing. I mean, aside from that, but this idea that he's on the phone with these governors telling them that they've got to crack down. I mean, he was foreshadowing what was going to happen in Washington, D.C. later that day. And he is calling on these governors to bring out the National Guard and, I don't know, do stuff like what we saw in Minnesota, where they were walking down the street, yelling at people to stay in their homes, and then firing rubber bullets at them to get them to go inside off of their porches without any warning. I mean, there's images like this throughout the country. We've got some footage of what happened in Seattle, where they essentially decide to disperse peaceful protesters with military hardware. It's nuts. And, you know, we got a speech from Joe Biden this morning. Apparently we had a speech from Nancy Pelosi. I missed that. They released a statement yesterday, Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi, that was, it's embarrassing to even read. If you want to signal that what's going on is wrong, what you do is you say, we're not going to have our vacation for the House. We're going to come back. Or at the very least, we're going to vote remotely. I mean, do something. Do something that signals that you take this seriously. Because, you know, I have always considered it to be a bit of a fantasy that, or fantastical, that, you know, Donald Trump is going to become some type of authoritarian despot. But, you know, because I was always wondering, like, where, him and what army? Well, it turns out to be, you know, probably the cops. And I don't know if it would be the military. I think the military is a little more professional than these cops, for sure. But it's also this Insurrection Act, you know, it's unclear exactly where the president can exercise it. But we will see. We'll talk more about that in a moment. Like I said, we're going to do some ads today. My kids were pretty adamant about this, I got to be honest with you. In fact, they were going to record something, but we won't play it this time. But this episode is brought to you by Magic Spoon. As you know, breakfast cereal, great for kids. You have some great memories as a kid of breakfast cereal. Easy, sit down. I remember, we all remember the mainstays. But you also realize, particularly when you have kids yourself, that these breakfast cereals, they're full of junk. Well, Magic Spoon is a new cereal company that's discovered a way to recreate your favorite childhood cereals with 0 sugar, 12 grams of protein, and only 3 net grams of carbs in each serving. It's sort of nuts, but it really does. Like, I can't remember what the Count Dracula, and then there was the Boo Berry, and then there was there's the other one with the tiger. I mean, I guess I can mention these. I don't know if I'm allowed to. And then the one with the toucan. And you can get a variety pack that lets you try them all 4. My kids love this stuff. They love it. I like the cocoa one, but I would be lying if I didn't dip into their fruity a little bit. But the kids love it. And it's keto friendly, it's gluten free, it's grain free, it's soy free, it's low carb, and it's GMO free. It's very rare that you have an instance where you feed your kids something and they're excited about it and it's not full of a pound of sugar. They love it. They really do. Go to magicspoon.com/majority report. Grab a variety pack. Try it today. Use the promo code Majority Report at checkout. Get free shipping. Magic Spoon is so confident in their product, they give you 100% happiness money-back guarantee. So if you don't like it, they'll refund your money. They don't ask any questions. That's magicspoon.com/majority report. Code is Majority Report for free shipping. Also, you got a lot of time at home these days. Well, whether you're alone or whether you're with others, break out Hunt a Killer and start to feel like that time is worthwhile. It's a murder mystery game, and it is fun to play. Great way to play teenage kids, but also, I mean, everything is from my perspective here, right? So it's all like, if it works with my children, I'm very excited. Hunt a Killer reinvents the way that we interact, rather, I should say, with murder mysteries. So you're not just watching it on TV. It's not just flowing through you. You're not just guessing as you watch TV. You're actually working your way through a murder mystery with all of the elements of the case. The subscription box has over 2,000 5-star reviews on Trustpilot. And what happens, you get a new delivery, you sift through the documents, you sift through the audio recordings, case files, you eliminate suspects until you crack the case. They even have a free online community that is spoiler-free and has over 100,000 members. So you can share theories and help each other out, get clues, spoiler-free. Don't go on there and blow it. Plus, part of the proceeds for every box goes to the Cold Case Foundation. Very fun to play. It's tough enough that you're challenged, but it's not, nobody's getting frustrated in our household. It's really fun. Mile and I have gone through a couple of mysteries now, and it's a great way to not have a screen in front of their face for, maybe 4 seconds at a time. Right now, just for our listeners, you can go to huntakiller.com/majority. Use the promo code majority at checkout for 20% off your first box. Head to huntakiller.com/majority. 20% off. Show your support for our show. That's huntakiller.com/majority. As always, we'll put all the links to this in the podcast and YouTube subscriptions. Let's get more to what took place yesterday. So after Donald Trump gets on the phone with governors and tells them they got to get harder and be tougher, they got to be more tough guys and gals, I guess. He goes on to give a speech at the White House. And I don't know if we'll hear it in any of these clips, but literally ongoing. I don't know, maybe is it even a mile away? Maybe a little bit more, maybe a little less. You had peaceful protesters congregating, and then all of a sudden, totally assaulted by police, by military helicopters. But here is the first part of Trump's speech. Apparently, they've decided in the White House that this is an opportunity for Trump to resurrect the silent majority of Americans. And that is, I don't think there is the silent majority of Americans that he thinks there is. But here's that speech.
And killed. These are not acts of peaceful protest. These are acts of domestic terror. The destruction of innocent life and the spilling of innocent blood is an offense to humanity and a crime against God. America needs creation, not destruction. Cooperation, not contempt.
Pause it for 1 second.
Security.
Have I missed something? Has there been any bloodshed of innocent people that has not been perpetrated by the police? I'm serious, guys. Are you aware of any reports of certainly of anybody killed by the protesters? Because we do know there have been at least one instance that I can think of at the top of my head of protesters dying or people thought to be protesters dying. I can't remember any of that.
There's been vigilantes with swords and bows and arrows that have been beaten, but
people who've gone on to, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know about innocent people.
I don't know if a guy pulling his car up, stepping out of his car with a bow and arrow and firing at protesters constitutes innocent, but continue.
Not anarchy. Healing, not hatred. Justice, not chaos. This is our mission, and we will succeed. 100%, we will succeed. Our country always wins. That is why I am taking immediate presidential action to stop the violence and restore security and safety in America. I am mobilizing all available federal resources, civilian and military, to stop the rioting and looting, to end the destruction and arson, and to protect the rights of law-abiding Americans, including your Second Amendment rights. Therefore, the following measures are going into effect immediately. First, we are ending the riots and lawlessness that has spread throughout our country. We will end it now. Today, I have strongly recommended to every governor to deploy the National Guard in sufficient numbers that we dominate the streets. Mayors and governors must establish an overwhelming law enforcement presence until the violence has been quelled. If a city or state refuses to take the actions that are necessary to defend the life and property of their residents, then I will deploy the United States military and quickly solve the problem for them. I am also taking swift and decisive action to protect our great capital, Washington, D.C. What happened in this city last night was a total disgrace.
All right. So there you have him. And one of the things that stuck out there, I mean, obviously we heard that audio of Trump calling the governors. And I should say that apparently he did place a call before that from the White House, before the call to the governors. And it was to his buddy, Vladimir Putin. I suspect just for some best practices, advice. How do you guys crack down on dissent in your country? Maybe he just needed to be bucked up, told that he can be a tough guy.
Copy your homework, Vlad.
Yeah. Hey, just one question. Like, what do you guys do with the? I also thought it was interesting that he mentioned the Second Amendment rights.
Yes.
That to me struck me as basically is it really a dog whistle? I mean, when you're talking about protests and you're talking about violence and you want to de-escalate, are you going to remind people that, hey, you have a Second Amendment right? Bring out your guns?
It's more like a coast is clear sort of signal.
It is, exactly. It is. Don't worry, guys. We are right here. You want to go on with and break out the weapons? We got your back. This is him basically saying to, his supporters, like when he would go into those rallies. You get sued, I'll cover your expenses. So then he goes on to talk about how he is the law and order president now.
Property. We are putting everybody on warning. Our 7 o'clock curfew will be strictly enforced. Those who threaten innocent life and property will be arrested, detained, and prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. I want the organizers of this terror to be on notice that you will face severe criminal penalties and lengthy sentences in jail. This includes Antifa and others who are leading instigators of this violence. One law and order, and that is what it is. One law. We have one beautiful law. And once that is restored and fully restored, we will help you.
Oh, pause it for a second. Go back. He misread it. It said once law and order is restored, and then he goes on with the speech, but he read it as one law and order.
One law.
One law.
One law, everybody.
Beautiful
one
law. There he is again. Go back. What an idiot.
At
least you're going to practice this speech as you start to roll out the military.
Jail. This includes Antifa and others who are leading instigators of this violence. One law and order, and that is what it is. One law. We have one beautiful law. And once that is restored and fully restored, we will help you, we will help your business, and we will help your family. America is founded upon the rule of law. It is the foundation of our prosperity, our freedom, and our very way of life. But where there is no law, there is no opportunity. Where there is no justice, there is no liberty. Where there is no safety, there is no future. We must never give in to anger or hatred.
There you go. A Stephen Miller special for you, ladies and gentlemen.
You can hear explosions in the background as he's saying that.
Just in that last, just play that last like 20 seconds.
I have a field recording from one of the pool reporters that we can play to demonstrate that.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Play that, because while he's giving this speech, folks, there are military personnel starting to attack protesters, and we will go to that other scene. But here, just listen here.
He will not have died in vain, but we cannot allow the righteous cries of peaceful protesters to be drowned out by an angry mob, the biggest victims of the rioting.
You could hear those flashbangs in the background, and that is the police, but also the military going after peaceful protesters. Let's play this clip. This is number 2. This is a clip. Garrett Hake, I think his last name is. He is a MSNBC reporter. He was on the scene, and there's been a couple instances of like MSNBC reporters, but a bunch of different ones, who've been in the middle of these protests and just like, I think Ali Velshi the other day, I don't know if he was in Minneapolis, saying this has been completely, totally peaceful. And then the cops come in and start firing weapons and throwing flashbangs. And here is Garrett Hake. This is during Donald Trump's speech in the Rose Garden. And just before, they're starting to clear this area out because they want to show it's a sign of it's a sign of force. I don't know where they got this idea. I I imagine they had planned this before their conversation with Putin in the morning, because for days now, we noticed this on Monday, that they were talking about Antifa. They had made this about Antifa as opposed to Black Lives Matter, and about they had sort of depoliticized or drained the content out of these protests. And this was clearly a way of showing that Donald Trump controls, I don't know, I guess a 1 mile square radius of Washington, D.C. Here is that report from Garrett Haake.
Within the last 15 minutes, mounted police have been coming down the street. You're going to see them in the frame now, using flashbangs in front of them and mounted police to clear what has been an entirely peaceful protest. Not 98%, not 99%, but 100% peaceful protest here today. People there was no throwing of water bottles, there was no throwing of objects. But a short time ago, mounted police officers have been clearing the street. Tony, if you could pan to the right, I want to show the military police. I want to show the military police on the side of the street. Over the last half hour, we've had military police, we've had Secret Service officers, we've had park police, and now we've had National Guardsmen lining the fence. They've been stepping up closer and closer and closer over the last few minutes. You can see them lining the fence. Just a short time ago, we heard them firing those pepper balls into the crowd here as they've been trying to disperse people. You can see these officers aiming at the protesters who are here in the park as we're being cleared back along the sidewalk here in front of 8th Street. Again, from where I stood, I could see absolutely nothing. Hang on a second here. Ma'am, are you all right?
No, she's not fucking all right, man.
I got hit bad. All right. I had to pull the mic there, but you could hear her say she got hit bad. Look, Ari, obviously this is an incredibly volatile situation here, and we're going to try to keep our distance from it as best we can. But this is by far the largest law enforcement presence I've seen in this park in the last 3 days, and by far the most aggressive action I've seen by law enforcement in this park in the last 3 days.
I mean, there you have it. I mean, the reporter said 100%, not 98, not 99, 100% peaceful protest. And they're fired upon with flashbangs and with those pepper pellet guns. This is what's going down. And, I for the life of me, I don't have a sense of how this is registering with, the broad American public. But my sense is this is not 1968. There is not a moral majority out there that is so firmly, repelled and thinks what's going on is alien. A lot of our population in this country, as opposed to, I think, what it was like in the 60s, frankly. There's a huge percentage of our population who I think have been engaged in some form of protest, right? Some form of marching. Even if it's like Earth Day or the environment. I think there's just like broad swaths of the population whose equivalents 50, 60 years ago have engaged in some form of civil protest, even if it's not particularly, aggressive, even if it was family friendly, people marching. People have marched for things. And I think they are just more sympathetic to what was going on here. I mean, I don't know how Trump thinks that he's going to be able to paint these protests as anything other than being peaceful when that's what they are, primarily. I guess we'll see. But why did the following? So you've got, this is the sequencing here. Trump on the phone, does a little foreign policy, calls Putin, gets some best practices, goes into the Rose Garden. announces that he's going to get, gets on the phone with the governors, tells them to get tough. You're going to break out your National Guard. You're going to quell these protests. You're going to put people in jail. Then he gets into the Rose Garden, talks about how he'd said that to the governors. Makes me think that audio was leaked by the White House. Announces that if the governors don't break out the National Guard, he is going to send in the military. That'll be interesting to see what happens when the military tries to cross into the borders, let's say, of New York State, and they're met with National Guardsmen. That'll be an interesting development. And then he simultaneously orders the military police and the DC police and Secret Service to clear out a park so that he can go and make this walk to a church. I think it's the St. John's Church. And he's holding out a Bible. And we can't see this in the walk, but what's interesting, to the left of where he is, Ivanka's there wearing a mask. She's the only person wearing a mask. And when she's in sight of Trump, she doesn't wear the mask. When she's out of sight from Trump, she wears the mask. It's sort of fascinating, but I don't know if we have a clip of that, but play this.
Stay Bible.
Love it.
He's asked, is that your Bible? And he says, it's a Bible.
Amazing.
Amazing. And then I think he's asked, like, have you read it or something? I can't remember exactly what the next line was. But there's Donald Trump
2
with this
Corinthians.
photo op. I mean, I honestly, like, if I could expend a, I don't know how much money I would do, but I would love to be able to sort of like be a fly on the wall of folks that are ostensibly, this is geared for, right? I mean, this isn't for us. We can see him, you know, we can hear the explosions in the background. This is strictly for his authoritarian followers. They must, or at least the White House thinks that these people are really going to lap this stuff up.
Yeah, we have the sizzle reel that they put together afterwards and put out in the, dictatorial propaganda stuff. If you want to see that.
Oh yeah. Let's take a look at how they thought this was going to read to their people.
It's so absurd. Okay.
Oh, well, that was definitely worth it.
We need to have a challenge where people just score that with different kinds of music and sound effects. Him waddling back to the White House.
Can we play that again? That thing is first of all, the production value on it sucks. And it really does look like what it was, which is, I'm going to take a walk. I'm going to stand in front of a church and pump a Bible and then walk back with a
real
bunch of
hasty.
guys around.
Yeah. Why did they show him like walking to there and back?
I don't quite get what this is about.
I can walk in the city at daytime still. Love it.
Freedom of movement for me. Not
still holding the Bible. Still got. Oh, where'd the Bible go? I don't know where it is.
I put it in my pants.
I lost the Bible. I lost the Bible halfway through. He misplaces the Bible.
I wonder if if the idea was that he walks alone. Like I wonder if that was like that. I mean, I imagine that's all the imaging, right? I mean, that's all there's some theory behind that. Somebody was like, we need to be able to show that you can walk anywhere in the Capitol, as if this is.
I think it's a statement, again, speaking against him being in the bunker on Sunday and being a pussy.
Going across the street?
Yep.
Good job.
Right. That's what it is. It's trying to prove that I'm not bunkering anymore. Got to show that I'm willing to get out there and walk.
I'm just worried about where that Bible went.
I wonder if that is the longest walk he's taken in decades. I almost couldn't make it. It was exhausting.
It could have came back too.
The New York Times had a garbage headline about yesterday. Something about chaos breaking out and Trump vowing to control it. Here is the Washington Post headline of what we saw yesterday in this whole episode. And it is, credit where credit's due. Police gas, force out peaceful protesters so Trump can pose for photos at a church. Somebody better be cutting up that video right now and making a lot of funny. We got to get on this immediately. You know what? Let's go to the phones. I just turned on the phone. I meant to do that earlier. I want to take a couple of calls. We're going to take calls in the fun half as well. Let's just take a look at this. This is from Seattle. There's two shots here that we have of this. This is another example of this. I mean, it's like when Occupy was starting to get rolled up, we know that there was coordination amongst police departments through the Department of Homeland Security, through these fusion centers. And there is a real sense, and I don't know how, if we will find out that there's been some variant of this, but there's a real sense that the police departments, at least themselves, have decided this is not about keeping order. This is about establishing what we're willing to do. And here is, watch this overhead shot in Seattle. We then will go to the ground in the next clip here. But watch this because it's pretty shocking. I mean, granted, the protesters are chanting and they're cheering, but they're behind a barricade. And these are trained police officers in full riot gear who are under no threat, but you can't quite tell from this, but let's just watch. That's that bottom corner there. The barriers. See, there's not one here. I think that's going to be relevant later. And they just start spraying. Completely out of the blue, they just start spraying people with pepper spray. And then they just start dropping flashbangs on them. Into the crowd, they're throwing these things. Rather indiscriminately. And you can hear them firing now their rubber bullet guns. They're firing as the protesters are running away.
Now it looks like a riot.
Yes. Now let's play because what happened is the commanding officer claimed that they were getting pelted with stuff and they were responding. So let's go down to a down on the ground view of what was going on there and see if you can see any of that, because you can't. Now, we don't know who this video is from. The last one was from Seattle Reddit. This one is this is from via Claire Elliott Yaza, but I don't know who took it exactly. There was nothing on there with the video, so apologies for lack of credit. But this guy was trying to basically, de-escalate, but I think he could see what was going on.
Now they done brought out the troopers. And I'm going to tell you something, the troopers ain't got no problem firing. These guys, the troopers ain't got no issue letting loose. We saw the troopers on Saturday. Now this situation is escalating.
So what he's just said is that it appears that the local police are replaced with the state troopers. And that makes him nervous because he realizes these guys have a greater propensity to let loose. But go ahead.
If you know anybody, tag and share this stream. This is right now live at East Precinct. The officers have changed their posture. This gentleman right here grabbed the barricade, and now you see they're reinforcing the barricade. We have not heard an audible anything from an authority here. The umbrellas are out. We're getting pushed back. Don't spray that shit. Don't spray it. Don't spray it. Okay, the umbrellas are here. You see people put out the umbrellas to block the spray. It's rowdy right here. Hold on. Let me bring it down. Let's just try to de-escalate. Let's try to de-escalate this. Let's just try to bring this down, guys. It's a lot of worse shit than going to jail, like a flashbang, shrapnel, or something. Let's bring this down. Let's bring this shit down. So we see him grabbing an umbrella. There's the spray. It's on now. It's on. East Precinct. They're losing control. State police are trying to open the barricade. They're putting the pepper spray in the air. Share this stream. Tag and share this stream. God damn it, they got me, you motherfuckers. I'm gonna eat this shit, though. There it is. It's a crush. I got pepper spray all over me. They're not moving. I got sprayed, but shit, I've been through worse. Barricade is up. The officers are coming with the spray. And this is exactly what's happened here. Get the fuck out my way. Let's see here. This is what's going on. I only got one eye. These are flashbangs. They're deploying flash. Hey, bring this shit down. Bring it down. This is.
That's all we found of that live stream. But it's pretty apparent that in the moments before, just at the moment they start spraying, there is absolutely no reason for them to spray. I don't even think they said disperse, frankly. But who cares if they did? There is no threat to any of those cops. There's no indication that there's any threat to anything there. But this is the posture that police departments have been taking across the country. And I don't know what ends up mitigating this. I don't know what ends up being the limiting principle. We had a situation in Washington, D.C. last night where like 100 protesters were chased by the cops, and and some guy apparently just let them into their house. And the cops stayed on that street out in front. And I'm talking like 50, 100 cops just waiting for them to come out. For all I know, they're still there. It's like a hostage situation, like a reverse hostage situation. It's very messed up. And I don't know how this, I really don't know how this ends. Let's go to calling from a 360 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? Oh, hold on one second. You there?
Hello, this is Justin from Washington.
Justin from Washington. What's on your mind?
Well, my very first protest was Saturday in Seattle, and I was there right before the gas and flashbangs, and it was peaceful, totally peaceful until that happened. I didn't see the rest of it as I got out of there, so I was parked really close. I am now protesting yesterday, and I'm looking to protest today. And we all cannot stop protesting.
Who is out there?
We do this every day.
Who is out there? I mean, give me a sense of the folks in Seattle that you're seeing at these protests.
They're just regular people. They've got the signs. They're just chanting, standing around, pushing for change.
20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. I mean, give me a relative breakdown of.
There was like 100, 200 people where I was at the very end before they started throwing the gas.
The ages of people.
All over the place. From they're bringing kids all the way up to 70 or so. There's one guy out there with drums chanting and yelling and helping us communicate and chant. There was a lot of that for about 2 hours until 3 o'clock when they attacked us. And there was no reason for it. It's totally ridiculous.
Yeah. I mean, I appreciate you going out there. Stay safe, Justin.
Yes, I'll try to stay safe and keep my cell phone and keep watching them.
Okay.
Thank you for what you guys do too.
All right. Well,
talk to you later.
All right. Bye-bye. Calling from an 801 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Sam, this is Kyle from Salt Lake City. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, Kyle from Salt Lake City. What's on your mind?
Well, I just wanted to first say that, unfortunately, I was a victim of some looting that took place last week. And by a victim of looting, I mean that a private equity company acquired the company that I work for and fired 150 of us last week during a pandemic that had nothing to do with the pandemic. So, yeah, that was some cool looting that took place that I'm not seeing any outrage about. So I figured I would share because I think that's pretty egregious thing to do at this time.
It's unbelievable, and they clearly use the pandemic as an excuse. I mean, I think, frankly, there's a lot of that's going on.
So we got completely gutted, and yeah. So that was there was a good Onion article that was just like looters failed to form a private equity firm first, and that was where they went wrong before robbing a Target or whatever.
What was? Do you mind telling me the company or no?
Probably could keep it on the DL a little bit, but it was a tech company here in Salt Lake. Yeah,
Sorry
not going to go
that.
into any more detail than that on the
I get
company itself. But also, I mean, like we've been doing super well too because we are online. We're a company that was benefiting from a lot of people spending a lot of time on their computers. I'll just say that.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, so I'll just briefly talk about the protests in Salt Lake if you'd like to hear. And
sure.
I could go into the All Lives Matter Archer as well because he's actually still not arrested. He did an interview from home
was
yesterday.
he in Salt Lake City?
Yeah.
All right. You know what? Let's play this. We were talking about this earlier. I don't know if we have the footage. There's two clips, right? We have the clip yesterday of him coming out. So the first clip is this guy basically driving his car into the middle of a protest and getting out, putting an arrow, I don't know if he had a quiver or what, putting an arrow into his bow, pulling back, firing the bow, missing a protester. And all right, so
also yelling "All Lives Matter" before taking aim at the protest.
Let's hear. Do we have this clip, Brendan? Okay, I'll play this one. There he is.
Look at this.
You get my car?
You call yourself an American?
Yes, I'm American. All lives matter.
That's right, but they won't matter until we're. Don't you dare! This is his car. This is his car. What the?
Fuck that bitch up!
So, and as far as I could tell, I don't know if there was a compound bow or not, but it doesn't matter. But it would if it hit you. And I mean, that's a hunting bow. And
yeah, so could I talk about like what happened with that whole thing? Because he tried to so that happened, and he immediately got pulled by the news who were there. And
well, wait a second, we have that clip, I think. So
okay.
he gets, as you can see, he was rushed by all the protesters and they beat him up. And Brendan, do you have the next clip?
I need to look for that.
Okay. And so he goes, apparently, he goes to, I don't know if the hospital or where it was, but the local news interviews him. And apparently, I don't know how they didn't get the whole story. But
no idea. No clue.
And do you know that he's going to claim in this clip, as Brendan finds it, that his car was set on fire? Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, so it actually was. It was kind of confusing because, so this was on Saturday. The protest started pretty early, and it had been very peaceful throughout the morning and afternoon, mainly because the city and the police made a very conscious decision to let the protesters, do some graffiti, throw some eggs or whatever, and just march very peacefully. In fact, like we were outside the precinct and all the cops were just inside, like looking out. It's like a very glass building, and they were all just looking outside from inside the building. So they had made that conscious decision to not escalate things at a certain point. And I don't know what exactly flipped to make all the cops and the National Guard come out. But at some point, there was someone who was not happy with the protests. They ran into some protesters with their car. I didn't see that one on the news, but I have some friends who were right behind the car, and the cops got that one on video. And so soon after that, there was an empty cop car that was flipped over and lit on fire in the middle of a major road in Salt Lake. And that's when things really turned up a notch, and like the National Guard came in, our governor and like a lot of the local Republican officials started like really freaking out about it. And so that's when they brought everyone in. And soon after that is when the archer showed up as well.
Okay. So the archer gets in his car, he sees this on TV probably, and he drives down there, gets out of his car.
Oh yeah.
With his
car.
car.
So we had been like monitoring, because on Twitter we had been getting some like messages from guys who were like, so every time like Governor Herbert or whoever sends out a tweet about the protests, you get a bunch of guys that are like, if you guys don't protect the city, like we're going to show up and do that same thing. So I was expecting there to be some guys like that. We had seen some Proud Boys earlier in the day, but I didn't expect that type of weaponry from these militiamen. So there, I expected someone to show up and kind of like be agitating people.
The guy's obviously somewhat disturbed, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Which is not even to say that
because I saw a tweet that said his car had been burned, but it was a picture of the cop car. But it did turn out that his car was burned.
I got to be honest with you. I'm not surprised if his car was burnt, because he went out there with a compound bow and is firing at people. This is a bow that is, this is a hunting bow. This is not.
Yeah, did Brendan find the clip of him lying about what happened?
Well, here is the interview, and it's, look, you're going to go and interview somebody and get their side of the story. You may want to just sort of double check on this, but here is the news report. Go ahead.
You guys, tell me your name one more time.
Brandon McCormick.
Brandon McCormick, he says his car was turned over and set on fire because he yelled, "All lives matter." What happened?
I got beat up. Well, first I got beat up when I yelled, "All lives matter." Then I pulled out weapons, then I got beat up some more. Then the cops grabbed me, and my car got totaled, and phone, everything. I lost everything. Coming down here to try to protect them with what weapons I had, because I am a chick felon. I've changed my life, and I back up the law enforcement. You know, I know some cops are bad. I know some people, all races are bad.
Did the police come and rescue you? What happened?
Finally. But I lost my car. I lost my phone.
How badly is your car damaged?
Well, I seen it on fire, so it's totaled. And everything I had, and I had probably another $1,000 worth of stuff in my car.
And what happened to the people who turned your car? Nothing.
I don't know if it got turned over. I just know it got totaled.
Can you ask him, was he in the car when the protesters approached him and tried to flip the car over?
Were you in the car when when they turned it over?
No, they didn't. I don't know if they turned it over or not. They beat me up, and the cops came and got
You were in the car at the time?
Yes, and then they torched it after the cops took me, including my phone. I can't even call for a ride. So I've been marching with these people all the way down here and all the way down here, trying to convince them all lives matter. These cops didn't do it. Some cops are bad. Some cops are...
How did you get hurt on your forehead?
Because I yelled out my window, cops...
Did somebody hit you with something?
Yes, 2 black and African Americans. They beat me through my open window that I yelled out, "All lives matter."
All right. All right.
I mean, this is, the guy's just lying through his teeth. We just watched what happened. I mean, and I can assure you, far more people saw that local news report than the bow and arrow that came out and fired at somebody.
Sam, the good thing, though, is they did, if that was the Fox 13 clip, they did issue a correction later after getting the footage, but it was insane that they let him go on like that in the first place. And he is very disturbed, and him straight up saying it was African Americans that did that to him. You can see in the clip, it was mainly white people that beating the shit out of him after he attempted to murder people. There were, tons of it was a very, very diverse crowd yesterday. You asked the Seattle guy what the age breakdown was. It was mainly a younger crowd, late teens, 20s and 30s. There were some older people as well. A lot of the our local socialist groups were involved. PSL did a very peaceful protest yesterday to try to kind of fix the narrative that happened with local news here, because this is stuff like this doesn't really happen in Salt Lake very often. Despite having we don't have our police forces here don't have a very good track record, and so yeah, this was pretty big news on all the local channels. So yeah, it was. That guy is just something else. But it's at least they issued a correction later on in the evening.
Kyle, appreciate the phone call.
Yeah, thanks, Sam.
Thanks. Let's head to the fun half. We will take more phone calls. We will go over some more footage. Do we have, is Nomi on the line?
Yes.
All right, let's bring her in. In the meantime, we should just remind you, this program relies on your support. You can become a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. If you're going through some financial stress right now, or anticipate going through some financial stress, still want the fun half of the program, send us an email at majorityreporters@gmail.com. If you're going through some financial stress and you're a member, head over into your membership. You can adjust your membership. If you go through the process of canceling, we can hook you up with a fix for you that will work for you. So check that out. Also, tonight is Tuesday. Michael Brooks Show happening tonight, live, 7 p.m. Patreon.com/TMBS, and on YouTube, of course, the Michael Brooks Show. Matt, do you know who's on tonight?
I do, yes. Chuka Ejechem and Matt Chrisman are on tonight, and Artesia Balthrop in the post game.
All right, so that should be a fun night over there, I'm sure. Lot to talk about on the unraveling of the country. And joining us now for the fun half, but also to tell us about what she's doing on her show this week, Nomiki Konst. Nomi, what's been going on down in your neck of the woods?
Well, there's just like so much of the country, there's a statewide curfew. Except as far as I know, and I've been checking in Tucson where I am, it hasn't brewed up near. I mean, it's nowhere near the rest of the country, even Phoenix. So it's a little strange that there's a curfew in other parts of the state. And don't forget, this is a Republican state, Governor Ducey. So I think there's a lot of pushback about why there's a curfew when there's not much happening outside of parts of Phoenix. And even that has become a little bit more contained. So I think we have to dig into, there's just so much happening at once. It's really hard to uncover all of it. But, why would they exercise that curfew in all of Arizona, which is a very large state? So, but on my show, which was taped before all this happened, we talk about the other crisis, climate change, which is, still there. With Margaret Klein Solomon, who's part of Climate Mobilization. She founded that, and she has a new book out. She's a clinical psychologist, and she talks about how to communicate the crisis of climate change, that it's existing now. It's really fascinating stuff because that's her background. And then we talked to Eva Putsova, who is a congressional candidate here in Arizona. She represents, or she's vying to represent, the Navajo Nation, which is the hardest hit per capita in the country when it comes to COVID. But at the beginning of the show, we do talk about the protests and the crisis in leadership and a little bit how we got here and why this moment isn't different, but it kind of is different. So I get, a little fired up, shocker. So you want to check that out.
I imagine. We'll talk a little bit about the primaries that are taking place today, a little bit later in the fun half. Don't forget the Antifada. Jamie, I imagine, has been rather busy over the past couple of nights, and they have a lot to talk about this week. I mean, who knows, what's going to happen tomorrow for that matter. Never mind by the end of the week. Matt, what's happening on the Literary Hangover Twitch stream?
Yeah, twitch.tv/literary hangover. I played Half-Life and we watched the 1954 BBC adaptation of George Orwell's 1984. So I don't know, I wasn't really in a mood to talk about the Wild West, so I just played 1984 and it seemed to fit the moment. So twitch.tv/literary hangover.
All right, folks, quick break, head into the fun half. Before we do, let me remind you, excited to introduce you to one of the coolest sponsors we've had. It's Hunt a Killer. It's a murder mystery subscription box. It's one of the most unique games out there, and it brings the fun of an escape room which you cannot go to probably for a long time, right to your home. You go to huntakiller.com/majority. Use the promo code majority at checkout for 20% off your first box. Check it out. A lot of fun. That's huntakiller.com/majority. Promo code majority. All right, quick break. Fun half. Left is best. Jamie and I may have a disagreement.
Yeah, you can't just say whatever you want about people just because you're rich.
I have an absolute right to mock them on YouTube.
He's up there buggy whipping like he's the boss.
I am not your employer.
I'm tired of the negativity.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to upset you. You're nervous. You're a little bit upset. You're riled up.
Yeah, maybe you should rethink your defense of that, you fucking idiots.
We're just going to get rid of you.
All right.
But dude. You want to smoke this joint?
Yes.
Do you feel like you are a dinosaur?
Some good shit.
Exactly. I'm happy now.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win-win.
Oh, hell yeah.
Now listen to me. 2, 3, 4, 5 times. 847-906-501-457-238-56-27. 1/2. 5 8s. 3.9 billion.
Wow.
He's the ultimate math nerd.
Don't you see?
Why don't you get a real job instead of spewing vitriol and hatred, you left-wing Limbaugh?
Everybody's taking their dumb juice today.
Come on, Sammy.
Dance, dance, dance.
Ooh. Rand Paul.
my first post-coital scene with a woman. I'm hoping to add more moves to my repertoire. All I have is the dip and the swirl.
Fine, we can double dip.
Yes, this is a perfect moment.
No.
Wait, what?
You make under $1 million a year. You're scum. You're not paying.
Excuse me? Fuck you, you fucking liberal elite. I think you belong in jail.
Thank you for saying that, Sam. You're a horrible, despicable person.
All right, gonna take a quick break. I want to take a moment to talk to some of the libertarians out there. Take whatever vehicle you want to drive to the library. What you're talking about is jibber jabber.
Classic. I'm feeling more chill already.
Good. Donald Trump can kiss all of our asses.
Hey, Sam. Hey, Andy. You guys ready to do some evil?
Hitler was such an idiot.
That guy might be a Nazi.
Agree.
No.
Death to America.
You.
Yes.
Wow.
Wow, that's weird. No way! Unbelievable. This guy's got a really good hook.
Throw our hands up.
Ooh. Wow.
But Sam, I gotta get off.
No worries. Let's. I want to just flesh this out a little bit. I mean, look, it's a free speech issue. If you don't like me,
Hey, shut up! Thank you for calling into the Majority Report. Sam will be with you shortly.
Well, it's a little disturbing to see that picture of me spinning at the end of that thing, clean shaven with the proper haircut. It was all ahead of us then. Very strange times, Nomi. How are you doing?
I'm okay, considering. Maddening, but I mean, I wish I had more therapy sessions available to me. That's all I'll say.
Right. We got to run those BetterHelp commercials again, frankly.
Yeah. How are you doing? How is everybody doing? I mean, since we talked last week, the world there's an uprising.
Well, there's an uprising, and there is, I think, a stoking of it, like an active stoking of it.
Yeah.
You know, it is one thing. I don't think that we should be terribly surprised that there is anger out there about the way that that Black people are policed in this country. Mm-hmm. And that there is just a general current of frustration amongst Black people, amongst other, Latinos, and people living in low income are dying at higher rates and getting higher infection rates of COVID-19. And then there is, just broadly a lot of frustration that exists across society. And all of this together, the idea that people are getting angry and things are boiling over, not terribly, in many respects to be expected. Mm-hmm. And, but the twist here is Donald Trump, who, I don't want to be fair to Donald Trump. It's not a question of being fair to Donald Trump, but the reality is that in the past, when he has had opportunities, not unlike just COVID-19, to let his inner authoritarian freak flag fly, he has been less hesitant to do so. But in this instance, and maybe it is a function of him coming out of that bunker and feeling embarrassed.
Right.
And he's got to sort of like equal the playing field in some fashion. I mean, the real question is, where do we go from here? And what are, governors going to do? And we'll see, because, like I say, I think there's something fundamentally different in terms of where the hearts and minds of the population are. Right. And I think most research shows that protests are most effective in terms of swaying public sentiment when you have nonviolent protesters met with violent reactionary forces.
Right.
And for the most part, these protesters have been nonviolent. There's looting that's taking place, but sometimes it's like, in New York, all the protests were happening in Brooklyn.
Right.
But the looting was happening in Manhattan. And while the cops were following the protesters in Brooklyn, people were breaking into, I guess, a bunch of, high-end stores in Manhattan.
So I was thinking about this yesterday because, obviously the news coverage, it's not obvious. I've been watching the news coverage very closely. And on CNN in particular, there was a clear shift between yesterday's coverage and the day before. The day before, it was all about the looters. Yesterday, it was all about oppression. And I think a lot of that has to do with Trump clearly, taking action. And they had to choose a side. But I was thinking about why this seemed different and just hearing accounts from folks on the ground. And, you and I have been at a ton of protests, and I covered protests for, a few years at TYT all around the country. And there's strategic, sure. I mean, there are organizers who do this, especially when it comes to Black Lives Matter, who do this regularly, and in New York especially. And what I found really odd about this was the looters were going to different places around the country. Like, there aren't normally protests on Montana Avenue in Santa Monica or on Melrose Avenue in West Hollywood. And New York is a little bit different because, it's very mixed. But to me, it seemed like the looters, there's instigators, and then there was something else happening. They were choosing different locations. Like, they weren't actually part of the movement at all. They weren't even taking leadership from the movement. They weren't even being called to these protests to the same locations. They weren't on the same chat threads. They weren't on the text threads, on the emails. They were going to different places and inciting something that may, have spread a little bit beyond control.
So,
does that make sense? Like,
what you're arguing is that the looting's not an extension of the protests, but it is something that's moving in parallel. I think in many instances that's the case. I mean, I think whoever that guy was with the umbrella and the black outfit in Minneapolis was trying to obviously encourage looting in that instance, and felt like it wasn't happening organically amongst the protests, and so. But, nevertheless, like, I don't right now. I mean, I think, there are certain instances in Minneapolis, there was a lot of, from what I understand, but it's very hard to get this information straight. Small businesses that were destroyed. And I think, at least for me personally, that I'm far more sympathetic to that than the idea of like a Target getting cleaned out. Yeah. I mean, I'm not encouraging it, and I don't think it's necessarily helpful. I don't think, but I'm also not terribly worried about it in the grand scheme of things.
But it's still, on the other side of it, it's just for a second, because there's still resources for communities. I mean, even though it's a Target, and I am all for tearing down the multinational corporations, so many communities their small businesses have been eliminated because of the Targets. And now you have communities that, my mom, this is just my own personal experience. She went to the CVS to get her pharmaceutical. She had to get her medicine, and the CVS had been looted, and the pharmacy had been looted, and she just couldn't get her medicine. That's just my mom. So think about that across the country in communities where that's their only access to groceries is a Target that's come in. So what does that do to the community? And I don't know. I think there's something to be said about this is not coming from the leadership of these very organized movements and strategic movements that have been fighting these fights for decades at this point.
Without a doubt. And I also think that the not in every instance, but I would imagine that in many instances the police departments are fine and dandy with that. Yeah. And all you need to do is look at what happened to places in Detroit and Watts in 68 and in other places around the country where you have these type of episodes where there's looting or there's fires, and 5-10 years, sometimes more.
Yeah.
Things are not rebuilt. They just stay there in ashes because there's nobody to come in and invest in those neighborhoods. And again, it's one of those situations where it's like, it's understandable that there's a huge amount of anger there. And we also look, I have plenty of clips we've seen where protesters have literally put themselves in between would-be looters and a target, for instance, not because they have any great love for Target, but they understand that there's no value to the community for that to happen. You know, it would be much better if, I mean, you know, and I don't know, but when it's a little bit tough to get upset about, you know, some, I don't know, jewelry store on Fifth Avenue in Manhattan, you know, I mean, obviously it's somebody's, but it's not going to have the long-term implications. Let's put it that way, that it will when it happens in underserved communities. Right. This is sort of interesting. What do you do if you're Tucker Carlson in this instance and your president has looked like a soy boy by going into the bunker, and then his whole stunt to clear out Washington, D.C. so he can hold up a Bible at a church comes off as completely ham-fisted? Tucker has got to figure out a way of threading the needle. And, you know, the way that, and I don't know why this comes to mind, Nomi, but the way that white supremacists work out the problem that if blacks and Latinos or whomever are lesser races than them, how is it that they also are aggrieved by them because they're being, you know, that these people are taking out their resources? And that's because in white nationalist lore, it's the Jews who are pulling the strings. And the Jews, they're clever. And they pull the strings and they use these other people to defeat the white people. Now, I don't know why that comes to mind, but here is a clip of Tucker Carlson talking about Donald Trump's failures.
No one has more contempt for Donald Trump's voters than Jared Kushner does, and no one expresses it more frequently. In 2016, Donald Trump ran as a law and order candidate because he meant it, and his views remain fundamentally unchanged today. But the president's famously sharp instincts, the ones that won him the presidency almost 4 years ago, have been since subverted at every level by Jared Kushner. This is true on immigration, on foreign policy, and especially on law enforcement.
That subversive little Jared Kushner. All of a sudden, Jared Kushner has all this power. It's almost like he's controlling him with strings, like a puppet master, if you will. Let's hear what Kushner is doing now. I wonder, he must have. Did he do this last night? Did Carlson do this last night?
Yes.
Here, let's play this.
But Kushner has convinced the president that throwing open the prisons is the key to winning African-American votes in the fall, and that those votes are essential to his reelection. Several times over the past few days, the president has signaled that he would very much like to crack down on rioters. That is his instinct. If you've watched him, you believe it. But every time he has been talked out of it by Jared Kushner and by aides that Kushner has hired and controls. Kushner's assumption, apparently, is that African-American voters like looting. That is wrong. Normal Americans of all colors hate looting.
Amazing.
Wow. Right? So there's Tucker Carlson explaining to his followers why Donald Trump is not performing in the way that they want to. And it's because he's being subverted by his son-in-law, who manipulates the blacks for the advantage.
He's a racist Jew.
Yeah.
This is crazy.
There you go, Tucker Carlson. Good stuff, guy. Good stuff.
You know, I think that they're going to try to push it as far as they can. There's just so much. We should really pay attention to Fox News and their this kind of subliminal messaging. It's not subliminal at all, actually. But because there's so much happening, they're not going to get the criticism they normally would. Like if he had said that 2 weeks ago, he'd probably be suspended from Fox News, I think.
And I would add, not only would I add that in terms of just like monitor, but like they tipped their hand yesterday. We had multiple clips because throughout the day they were talking about Antifa. Right. And it was really like they were teeing something up. I mean, Donald Trump didn't come up with this yesterday morning. They were talking about Antifa over the weekend, and they were really teeing up, I think, this assault on the protesters. And speaking of Fox and Friends, maybe they're teeing up something else here, because I don't think, frankly, that Brian Kilmeade goes off the, off and freelances that too often. Here he is talking about what needs to be done to break up these protests. Now, remember, the president has argued that he is going to activate the military in a bizarre attempt to implement the Insurrection Act. Who knows how the military will respond to that? Supposedly they didn't get any contact. But here is Kilmeade with another idea.
Problem is, Dan, 30 seconds, the unrest is organized. It's not organic. In many cases, the violence is organized. It's systematic. That's the challenge. Makes me think we can unwind it through interrogation.
Well, there's a lot of evil. There are plenty of evildoers in this country who are seeking to take advantage of this moment in our history to suit their own agenda. And it's over to our state, local, and federal law enforcement to collect the information on those individuals and to conduct appropriate law enforcement measures to stop the violence, which is obviously just so tarnishing whatever narrative the peaceful protesters hope to achieve. And that's something, that's the wicked challenge, as I said, that I think that we face right now going forward.
We need former CIA guys like you helping us out domestically to try to figure out who's behind the the brick drop-offs, who's behind the communication, and that can only happen if we find out who put them there by talking to the people that are there and caught. It doesn't seem like there's much interest in interrogating them right now.
Now, what's fascinating about this is the ex-CIA guy has basically said has sitting there and basically rejecting what Kilmeade is suggesting.
Right.
He says, it's ruining the narrative, which presumably he thinks is justified, and that there are just some evildoers who take advantage of the moment. But Kilmeade's off on the whole, who's dropping off these bricks in the middle of the city into these big packages.
Great question.
It is a
would
good
be interesting if we could investigate that and see who's actually doing that. Because my guess is, if you want to go down that rabbit hole, you're going to be surprised. And also, just as a side note, if, say, 4 days ago, mayors across the country had asked their police to stand down, to stay home, or just very simply to protect the businesses, I don't see any of that. Would we have this situation? Because like we just said,
No.
if they're organizing in one place and doing very peaceful marches, and then in completely separate locations many times, you have looters. What if the police had gone to the looters and not to the protesters?
Frankly, I think had that DA from that county been, just come out and said, it's going to take time. We're going to charge these guys, but it's going to take a little time because we want to make sure we have an airtight case. And that's about all I can say at this point because everybody's seen the video. Who knows where we would be at this point? But, the point is that the president and in many respects, the Republican Party feel that their only hope this fall is going to be to activate their people to such a degree to scare them. I think the theory is wrong because, like I say, I think things have changed in this country, and I don't think Donald Trump had the critical mass that he needs to make it feel like, I think there's a lot of people out there going like, I'm definitely not on Donald Trump's side, and if there's only two sides, that means I'm on the protesters' sides. And I think there's just too many of those people for this to be effective at this point. However, what we're already seeing is Bill Barr the other day, I guess this was Monday or Sunday, was on TV or in an interview with New York Times Magazine. And New York Times Magazine was really credulous on this. He was in an interview, said that a foreign operation to mail in fake ballots was one of the issues that he's really worried about. Now, this is obviously huge because there's a big push in states. We just saw this in Virginia. They're going to allow absentee ballots, no excuse absentee ballots for the general election. There's going to be some more mail-in ballots in Nevada. We're starting to see this around the country. and there's a push to do it nationally. He's claiming that a foreign operation to mail in fake ballots is one of the issues that he's real worried about. And the Washington Post was a little more skeptical about that claim than the New York Times. And this is their lead. Current and former election administrators say it would be virtually impossible for a foreign country to produce and mail in phony absentee ballots without detection. We've been talking about how, in terms of foreign influence, there are a number of foreign countries that could easily make counterfeit ballots, put names on them, and send them in, Barr said. And it'd be very hard to sort it out what's happening. Barr offered no evidence about that. The New York Times Magazine lapped it up, took it seriously. But this Washington Post piece goes around and interviewed election officials in multiple states, and they all said it would be virtually impossible for a foreign government to achieve what Barr described. Judd Choate, election chief in Colorado, where nearly all voters are cast ballots by mail, said, quote, there is zero chance it could happen in his state because of security precautions taking place there. States use a variety of safeguards to confirm the validity of mail-in ballots. About half the states, the envelopes have a tracking code. 15 states require signatures to be matched against voter registration. If they're rejected, they're not sent in regulation envelopes that vary widely from state to state. Their paper stock is different. And some of these election people are like, we know exactly how many ballots we send out.
Right.
And we know how many are sent back in, and we know who we mailed them to. The idea that anybody could, on a concerted effort, never mind a foreign government, mail in ballots in the names of either fake people or real people and us not knowing it is virtually impossible.
Right.
But Bill Barr is on a national magazine trying to create, I mean, there's a little bit of Judy Miller in this. It's obviously the stakes aren't exactly the same way, but the technique is very similar. We're just citing the New York Times. Well, the New York Times is citing you. Mm-hmm. And this is, Donald Trump has been out there. He does not want these mail-in ballots. He's convinced that's how he's going to lose. And what we may be seeing now may be a dry run. I don't know if they think that way, but it's a little disturbing. It's a little disturbing because we have seen Donald Trump's at least willingness to talk about breaking out the U.S. military for protests that really, I mean, across the country, there's a lot of tents, but this is.
Well, the other thing about the military is, let's pace this out. So it's June right now. This actually cannot go on for that long at the pace that the police force and military and National Guard are being employed on protesters. Even in the last 2 days, the protests have shrunk because of that, because there's just too much violence. I mean, in some cities, not all cities. So pace that out for the next, if he's trying to be the wartime president, I just don't see this sustain. I mean, it's not sustainable on his end, his strategy, especially if we go into the conventions. Like, how do we see this unfolding for him? You have to be wartime president at the time of the election, not.
We were having this conversation before. Like, I have no idea. Like how you escalate from here, right? I mean, because narratively speaking, how does he top this? I mean, if they see value in this for their audience, right? Like, do you go back to Obamagate after this? It sounds a little anticlimactic, right? Like where do they go after this? Like, I honestly, we're going to need the alien invasion.
I mean,
we're going to need the alien invasion.
Maybe it's just about small businesses being crushed and blaming it. I mean, it might escalate because if it suddenly becomes all day long, it's not COVID and his failures of COVID and responding to working people being on the front lines. It's now about small businesses being crushed. The narrative might just be about how, minority communities attack small businesses. And that's another race war right there. I don't know. I don't know either. I could see carrying out for the next few months, but
I honestly, for the life of me, I have no idea. I don't think I've ever felt as sort of unsure of what's happening in the next 48 hours as I do today.
My guess is they're unsure too.
Calling from a 504 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Yeah, this is Bruce from Louisiana.
Bruce from Louisiana. What's on your mind?
Yeah, well, I think you need to go back with a lot of this stuff. Really started back in 2011 when Obama actually made fun of Trump at the the White House
Correspondence Dinner.
Correspondence Dinner. Yeah, I think that's when he made a decision to run for presidency to get back at Obama. And you look back at his thought processes and the people that kind of tootled him. You go back to Roy Cohn, and then, of course, you got Roger Stone, all these people that are backstabbers and people that really delve back into deep thoughts of dirty campaigning and twisting the truth. And that's where all this lies. And he keeps talking about a deep state, but he's trying to create probably one of the deepest deep states there ever was. By the people he's appointed, the people he's got to go and fix things for him.
Well,
he's
I think
going
he's,
through the courts and everything.
I think he's basically, when the term deep state really is more about sort of like an apparatus that works. Generally, it's in reference to like foreign policy. And it's just, sort of an ideology that gets embedded and that is there. It is more bureaucratic. I mean, I think what Trump is really just doing is he's surrounding himself in the same way that a crime syndicate boss would, which is with people who are loyal, people who are dirty enough themselves that they can't turn on him. And that's, I think, the way that he functions. And I think he has found a lot of those people at this point. And I think at one point he got a certain amount of confidence in the position, and he's done that. And he's trying to both, I think also, to be honest with you, I think he's a little bit nuts, a bit nuts. And I think he is being driven by that. So it's not always necessarily like broadly strategic. I think he just has one go-to tactic, and it's pretty effective. And I think the reason why it's effective is because we as a society have some very loose stitching, as it were. And so it is highly permeable. And it is, all he's doing, and I appreciate the phone call, all that Donald Trump is doing is he is, it's almost like, if you got a hole in an inner tube, and you immerse it in water, you start to see the little bubbles come up as to where the hole is. Donald Trump is sort of the we are awash in Donald Trumpism, and it is exposing the little tears and holes in our society. But those holes have existed, and the people who are suffering because of them are fully aware of it. It's just that it's becoming a lot clearer to, and these holes also include not just what's happening in the context of the working class people's lives and people living in poverty's lives and people who are, marginal power in our society, transgender folks, black folks, Latinos, women. But also it has exposed the sort of the failure of our institutions. I mean, I think, a lot of people were on to this for quite some time. We were on to it in the 2008 financial crisis. Certainly Occupy was. People have been writing about it for some time. But, all of the institutions have failed. All of them. They have all failed. And both governmental, both civilian, professions. I mean, there is a mass failure of institutions and of things that used to be not necessarily authority, but authoritative. And, I
Well, and Sam, right now in this moment, obviously it's a culmination of so many events, and and George Floyd's murder was what signaled it and set it off. But I think what's being revealed right now is like the most extreme forms of every single faction, in good and bad. So the worst forms of fascist authoritarian behaviors coming from Trump that we've probably seen so far. The worst silence we've ever seen from neoliberals. Like, every worst instinct that they have is being exacerbated. It's their silence is deafening, right? And then for the movement, just the line is so clear. Anybody who is an ally but not on the front lines is now there. So I don't know. I mean, I think there is something about this moment and everything you just said, that it's not just like the curtains being pulled back or the bubbles are coming to the surface. We're seeing whatever's always been there. It's that we're now becoming the most extraordinary versions of ourselves.
A lot of things are heightened right now, without a doubt. Let's go to the IM's huge ass. Thank you. It's been a while since we've had one of those. Love the show. Winnipeg Craig, this is Canada's Pelosi crap, a symbol of the resistance for our gullible liberals. Not sure what that is. Nomi, Tucker doesn't say anything that wasn't approved by his bosses, says Ryan Cole. Scooney, the footage you've been showing reminds me of the popular uprising in Ukraine. Check out the excellent Netflix documentary, Winter on Fire. That ended in a mini civil war. Can see this getting a lot worse before it gets better. Do we have that clip from California? Guys?
The local news report?
No. Is that the one where the guy takes the gun out of the truck?
Yes.
All right, let's play this. Where in California was this? I can't remember off the top of my head.
Upland.
This thing looks like there's apparently a protest. I think it's marching down a street in what appears to be a relatively sort of suburban style area in California. I don't know the context, frankly, but I was struck by this clip of video, and apparently the man who brandishes his gun at least went in to talk to the authorities. I don't know that he was charged with anything, but this had the feel for me, Nomi, and I'm dating myself a little bit here, of a early 1980s ABC Sunday night movie about some oncoming modern civil war in the United States. Like, this looks like the production value looks like it's small enough, but it gives you the sense of like what could happen in this country. And if you had asked me, a couple of months ago, I would have been like, absolutely not. But the idea that there could be this sort of like small skirmish, civil war type of stuff, nothing like, the first Civil War, but like these almost like these skirmishes. I watch
Jamie
this.
would have seen it coming, though.
All right, everybody, back the fuck up! Back the fuck up! You want to get stupid?
So that guy pulls out some type of assault style rifle with one of those, like, I think it's a drum cartridge he's got on there. And yelling at people, back the F up, puts it back into his car when he realizes, like, maybe that's probably not a good idea for me to, like, waving this thing around. Because there's a protest across the street. But that really gives you a sense of, like, you know, how these things could go sideways.
It's like, yeah. I think, you know what I'm interested in seeing is how many members. Okay, so if Trump continues to deploy National Guard or more police, and you're seeing it already, there are people in the police force who are resigning out of protest, and I mean, we have to be. I don't know what the numbers are, the statistics, but if we were to see the police force and how many people are veterans, and we see so many of these incidents on camera where their behaviors are PTSD potentially, or how they were trained in the military with the crazy video games that they're forced to use, and then it turns into real life. And you're seeing so the number of military members and veterans that are in the police force right now, and how many are people of color. Because, of course, we know that certain communities were targeted to enroll more people of color in the military. I'm really curious to see what the dynamics are and how many resign out of protest and how that's going to – what was that?
Oh, I was just going to say when we have a clip of a cop who resigned in Oklahoma City and is protesting, explaining why he did it.
Yeah, let's take a look at this. There's been I've heard of a couple of these anecdotally on social media, but I think we're going to see more of this. And you know, we were talking before the show, like, you know, if Trump does deploy the military, they're going to be a lot more, I think, disciplined and a lot more, I think, flexible, frankly, with protesters than the cops are. The cops are made up of a lot of guys who are cosplaying a little bit. And when they get their Buffy stuff on, they start to think about, you know, I'm like Rambo. The military personnel, they're like, that's the movies. In real life, it's not so nice. But here is this cop from Oklahoma, is it?
Oklahoma City, yeah.
Yep.
Kamal Williams, 5 minutes. Hold on, it's Kamal Williams. 5 minutes ago, I worked at the Oklahoma Sheriff's Department. I came out and I said, may I take a knee? They told me no. I said, can I speak to the captain? She came back. She said, what do you need to speak to the captain for? I said, if you're not a captain, then I don't need to talk to you. I want to talk to my captain. She said, why do you want to be out here? I said, yesterday, my life was on the line, and y'all had me out here in Shields. So when y'all had me out here in Shields, y'all told me I couldn't take a knee. So today, I want to take a knee. He said, no, you can't take a knee. So I said, here's my badge, and I won't come back. And here I am protesting.
Oklahoma City sheriff, or in the sheriff's department, basically telling the story about why I said, you know, when I was in uniform, all right, I'm not going to take, I'm not going to take a knee, but you won't let me do it on my own time, or then forget it. I'm gone. I think we're going to see a lot of that. I think there's going to be some. I hope there is. I really do, for the sake of the country.
I want to see how the unions respond.
Most of the unions are not going to respond very well. I can tell you that right now. In New York, the New York City Police Union basically said it's war if they start to release the conduct records of the police department.
The AFL-CIO should be pressured to expel the police unions.
Totally.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Kim Kelly just wrote a piece on that in the New Republic as well. So check that out.
Other unions in the AFL-CIO should be pressuring the leadership to do so.
Yeah, no Blackout Tuesday. If you're in the AFL-CIO, you tell your membership, you tell the AFL-CIO leadership to expel the cop unions now.
Yeah.
Just getting I haven't seen this. Getting an IM. Let's see. Hold on one second. Oh, shoot. Let me email this to you, Brandon, because I can't on a wrong computer. Oh, there we go. getting I am about the question about bricks. Where was that? So Alex JS, Brendan, I've just emailed that to you. Brian Kilmeade would like to know who's dropping off bricks. He might be surprised. This is video on Twitter. Can you make this out, Brendan?
Wait for it to load. Oh, come on.
There's been like some conjecture around where all these bricks showing up. Like there was one pallet of bricks that was just sort of left in the middle of the city. Now, occasionally that happens in construction areas. Certainly, there are times, but it's a little bit strange to see a pallet of bricks and not see any scaffolding, not see any, it's just the middle of the city. It's a little weird.
Yeah.
And now maybe, the protesters have the wherewithal and the resources to deliver a pallet of bricks into the city. But
what are all these security? There's so much security footage, right? Especially in New York, not just with the buildings and the company, the businesses. The actual NYPD has security footage out, like on every corner, every inch of the city is monitored.
I haven't seen these bricks in necessarily in New York City, but maybe.
But every major city has it. New York in particular.
Theoretically, right?
Yeah. Well, let's get to the bottom of it.
This is in Boston, by the way.
Oh, this is in Boston. All right, let's play this. There's the cops. And what are they doing? What's in the back of that truck?
Bricks?
Oh, my God.
What the fuck are those?
Those look like bricks. Look, yeah, those are fucking bricks. What the fuck?
That's
not those bricks so that the protesters don't fucking use them, dude. That's what they're doing. They're doing that for undercover police officers that are getting involved in the protests so that they have an excuse to beat the shit out of people. So.
Wow. I don't know how to interpret that in any other way than what those people who were narrating it were saying. Now, we can't confirm where that video is from, but that would be a decent production if somebody was to have gotten that vehicle there and those guys dressed like cops. And
because it's not like the police are picking up the bricks afterwards. They're not part of cleanup.
No. Yeah. And they wouldn't have stacked them so carefully, I think, in the back of the truck. I get the feeling.
Exactly.
I think it is what it looks like. I think we saw that figure smashing out the windows. I think until the cops start behaving themselves better in other areas, it's fair to assume that that is what it looks like, and that they are allowing the rioting by instigating the protesters and ignoring the rioters because they like it for propaganda value. And
look, I know there's some skepticism about this, but the data shows that, and there's certainly it is insufficient, but it certainly seems necessary, that when police departments know that the DOJ or the DOJ is specifically inside the police department because of a consent decree or whatever it is, there is a change in behavior. There is data that shows shootings go down, complaints go down when they are being watched. And police departments have had the message from the Trump administration, explicit message. You be you. You do you. We're not coming. There's no oversight. There's no oversight. And when there is no oversight and the cops can, with complete immunity, shoot at the media.
Right.
And they're, what they're communicating is, there's nobody. Nobody's going to stop us. We're not going to get stopped by the feds. We're not going to get stopped by the press. And there's been very few instances where we see, any elected leaders doing anything.
How long has the FBI they've been investigating police forces across the country for white supremacy for what, like 3 or 4 years now?
Well, who knows? It's funny that you mentioned that. Here's a clip of a guy. I don't want a spoiler alert here, but this is in Rochester, Minnesota. The cops target a black guy who they presume is, well, I guess maybe they're not presuming anything. They're just seeing a black guy, and they decide this is somebody we should take off the street just by virtue of the fact that he was black. And it's going to be one of those rare occasions where, this is actually going to turn out not horribly to watch this. This is pretty amazing video. Was pushed out by Talking Points Memo, but I don't know who took it. Check this out.
You guys look at the wrong guy. You guys are fucking stupid. That's not you. You guys are racial profile thinking I'm somebody. I take both of you motherfuckers. Take them cuffs off. Sir. I got them. Take them cuffs off. I'll take both of you motherfuckers right now. This guy got the cleanest record. Y'all just. I'll take both of you motherfuckers right now. Take the cuffs off. For me, y'all got the wrong stupid, man. You guys are the dumbest motherfuckers I ever met in my life. Travis fucking walk. You are stupid. I don't know how you became a cop. Got the wrong dude. Matter of fact, anybody can become a cop nowadays. Yeah, so you guys really had no other choice to do? You guys really had nothing else to go to college for but be a cop and harass me? To assume I'm somebody I'm not? My ID's in my back pocket. Watch how funny this is. Go ahead, look at it. No, don't hate me. Look at it. Oh, what does that say? What does that say? Oh. Wrong guy. Oh. Wrong guy. Oh my God. No, get the fuck off me, dude. Get off me, dude. Bro, you fucked up. Matter of fact, I need our cars. I need your supervisor over here. Call your supervisor. Call your supervisor. Call your supervisor over here. You guys are the stupidest motherfuckers I ever met in my life. How'd you guys... what the fuck is wrong with you guys? Look at him. Get him. This outside. And this guy here. No, what do you mean I look like him? I need your guys. I need your supervisor right here. Supervisor. Sir, can you please come here? Are you the supervisor? These guys are racially profiling me. They assume I'm someone that I'm not. I told them I'm not who they think I am. And they said, no, you are. I'm positive you are. So, I need their cards. I need your card. I need your card. I need your card. No. Yes, I request your supervisor. Why is that? Bro, that was fucked up. You guys wasn't us. No, these are the people. Yes, I'm the people. You guys are us. So, that's because the corrupt is fucked. I would like okay, I would like your card as well. Yep, you can have my card. And I'm going to follow the board on you, and you. Because you guys are all stupid. You guys are the dumbest motherfuckers I ever met in my life. See y'all later. You're glad why, bro? You guys really work? This motherfucker. Is that how you guys work nowadays? You assume someone is someone and that's it? That's all you guys need? Yeah? Oh my God, what is American gangster? Yeah, we're allowed to. You're allowed to. We're allowed to what? Talk to somebody. It wasn't allowed.
Yeah, there you go. They just arrested an FBI agent, apparently, and they rather quickly realized their mistake after he checked his ID.
And then the guy's like, "Oh, we're allowed to do this." No, you are not.
No.
Who's telling you this? But it's exactly what you're saying. There's no accountability, and who knows what's happening internally, what they're saying to police that they can and cannot do.
Right. That is the issue.
Someone turn on your cameras. If you're a police officer and you're watching right now and you are open to outing your police union and your leadership for giving you false information, get that on camera. We need whistleblowers.
Oh, we should talk a little bit about the primary. A couple of things. There's primaries today in Maryland, Indiana, New Mexico, Pennsylvania, Baltimore, and D.C. The biggest one, or the one that I'm watching and hoping, and it's a very uphill climb, is Michaela Wilkes running against Steny Hoyer in Maryland's 5th district. I mean, in this environment, who knows, right? I mean, honestly, like, who knows? But then we have some in Indiana, like I said, some in New Mexico. Valerie Plame is running in New Mexico's 3rd. That's, I guess, the highest profile. There is some races in Pennsylvania. We may have some folks on tomorrow to talk about it, but there's some awesome news in New York. And I think I can't remember which district it is actually. It is in the 16th. I think it's the 16th New York congressional district. Elliot Engel is there, and I interviewed two of the challengers actually. Jamal Bowman, who is a principal at a school in the Bronx, or former, I should say, Bronx middle school principal, and another guy, Andam Girgorgis, and Andam was also a good candidate.
Great candidate. Great.
Jamal Bowman was extremely impressive, and apparently Andam has dropped out as of today and has endorsed Jamal Bowman. And Elliot Engel has barely been in the district still. And this would be awesome to see him gone. And this is happening. Here he is on a hot mic.
There's too many folks here.
Let's see if you can hear this.
Then I gotta go down the list, and it's just too many folks here. Say that again? Don't do that to me. We're not gonna do this. We're not gonna then I gotta go down the list, and it's just too many.
Can you explain that a little bit more? Because it was a little hard to hear.
It's hard to hear, but what Engel is saying, if I wasn't being primaried, I wouldn't be here. And he's saying this to Ruben Diaz Jr. for a turn to speak.
Interesting.
And this is a hot mic. Listen to this. Wow.
Where were they?
Then I gotta go down the list, and it's just too many folks here. Say that again?
Okay, so this is what it is. They're talking about people who are going to speak at this. I don't know what's going on, but it's in the Bronx, and they're going to speak, I imagine, to the folks there about Floyd, I would imagine, and about what's going on with the protests. And Engel twice says, if I didn't have a primary, I wouldn't care. In other words, I want to be on the speakers list.
Of course.
Wow.
So
that's
Bronx.
Not gonna help.
So Ruben Diaz Jr., for people who don't know, is the Bronx borough president, and his father, who is a nutcase, is running. He's been in elected office as city councilman. He's a reverend, and is far more conservative than his son, but his son's no saint either. His father is running for a seat adjacent to that seat for Congress. It's a very crowded field. Ruben Diaz Sr., who is openly he's homophobic.
He could
a lot
win.
of issues there, and he could very well win, because a lot of people don't understand about the Bronx is it is religious conservative. There's a lot of these like very strange mega churches that pop up. He could very well win, and it's a crowded race, so very crowded primary, and it's a very Democratic district. So it's the Bronx is fascinating. But in terms of Andam, can I just give him a shout out? Because I actually thought he was extraordinary. And the way that this race played out is it really became about coalition organizations. And I'm of the belief that, had it been a different moment, he would have probably done much better. We don't know, actually. Like, there was no internal polling as far as we know. It just became a coalition, or, there's no way of telling in this kind of climate. So he raised a very, very respectable amount of money. He ran as an unapologetic progressive. He's a teacher. He has a very bright future. And I also thought that he did it with such grace. And, there was a lot of background noise to get him out of the race because of the coalitions behind Jamal, who's also wonderful. I'm not criticizing Jamal. Like, he's a wonderful candidate. But this is where we have to keep in mind that, like, progressives also have our own organizations that, like, push people out of races. And that is absolutely documented in the story that the WFP orchestrated him getting out of the race. Which,
right. I got to say, I don't think I have, I don't know if I've probably done now close to 20, maybe 24 interviews with challengers across the country. I think that's the only race where I interviewed 2 challengers. Maybe there was one other.
Yeah.
But because they were both really good. I mean, I did like Bowman quite a bit. Frankly, I'm always. He's older. I think Ondom has a future in politics in this state, and so. We'll see. I mean, I was impressed with both of them, but I'm happy that there is some coalescing because I think this is a good opportunity to take Engel out. I really do, and we'll see. But
I mean, who knows what's going to happen right now?
That's the thing. I don't know how to predict it. Spence Geek, Trump's Bible video is North Korean. Everything is fine here. The capital is calm video for the suburban whitey.
That's right.
Zadarov, war crime president. You get Greg Palestine in terms of voting legitimacy. Perhaps. Trumpy Bear, rubber bullet is a misnomer. It's a steel ball covered with a thin layer of rubber. We should call them rubber-coated steel balls or something more accurate. I've always assumed they were just bullet-shaped pieces of rubber due to the name. Interesting. Ramses, do you have any tips or pointers for a person going to a protest? You can find on Twitter, you want to find like the name of, just in case, local bond organizations and also legal defense. Have those numbers, maybe write it on your arm in indelible marker. I think, frankly, if I was to go out there wearing a pair of glasses, probably a good idea. Goggles, even maybe.
Cover your
It depends
arms.
on how close you're going to get.
Yeah.
But helmets are good. Maybe if you expect there might be gas and pepper spray, Maalox or milk.
Running shoes.
And running shoes. Yeah.
And make sure to cover yourself because, as much as you can. I can't believe how many protesters I'm seeing that have skin exposed.
Yep.
There's a chart. There's one that's circulating online. Things to prepare for the protest.
Yep. Christo, they literally gassed St. John's priests on church property so Trump could pose with the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
Penny from New Mexico. Sam, great analysis as usual. One thing I notice is that many people frequently do, including you and the MR team, is leave out indigenous people when you name who gets targeted or is marginalized. Unless it's a specific story to them. Please begin including more. Thanks. Yeah, good point. I apologize for that. Josh from Connecticut. I live in northeastern corner of Connecticut, Mass. I feel like I need to help, but don't know what to do. Well, I know there's probably some protests up there in Connecticut, maybe in Western Massachusetts. But the thing that you can do if you have the resources is to donate to things like bond funds and bail funds and amplify people on social media. That's helpful.
And talk to people. I mean, we forget that, but so much of this process is educating people about, even the minor differences between who the looters are.
Yep. Educating people and helping them interpret what they're seeing is very important. And, you talk to someone who lives in Connecticut and you don't know, maybe they got relatives who live in other places of the country. I mean, it's very helpful thing to do.
Yep.
Amy Jean Progressive, 760 area code. The Upland guy with the gun has been arrested. Oh, there you go.
Good.
This is amazing. So there was a live TV crew, Fox 11 reporter in Van Nuys, and apparently they were filming some looters who were looting at a local sort of bodega, I think it was. And the cops came, and the reporter is trying to point out who the looters are. The store owners were black. And so, of course, what happens next with the cops. Play this clip, number 13.
This vehicle and those guys over there got out of the other vehicle. There's a gold store in the parking lot, and they were heading to it. And these guys came out and they said, "No, you're not."
Wow.
And he's with us. They're having a standoff here.
Oh my God.
Arguing about why they're not being allowed to break into the place. Here comes the cops. They're trying to flag them down. We're trying to flag down the cops.
Pause it. Just
Hold
to
on,
be
let me
clear
flag
here,
him back
just
here.
to be clear, what's going on is these guys with the shotguns are actually coming from the liquor store, and they were protecting apparently another store in this sort of like the mini strip mall type of thing. And so the looters have run off at this point, and here come the cops. So everybody thinks here comes the cavalry, but it turns out not to be the cavalry.
They're driving past us. Stop.
This is one of the most surreal moments we've seen. What is underway right now in Van Nuys. All right, so here come the police officers to help these community members.
The guys on the other side are in cars. All right, here they come. The guys here are trying to stop over there from looting in the cars. All right, now they're telling them, no, they're fine.
They're good.
Oh, gosh.
Oh, now they're trying to arrest the shotguns.
Oh, my God. Joe, to your right. Come on.
He's with us.
He is with me. Press. Sir, they're okay, sir. They're the store owners. They were protecting the looters, sir.
Whoa.
They're protecting the stores. The looters are over there.
Stand down for a sec, please. Relax.
You're losing your looters.
We're
They're going down that way. These are the people in the store
Which
trying to
ones?
stop.
Point.
All three of them.
Okay, we're putting those in handcuffs right now.
They're not the looters.
One person talk. Where's the looter? Where's the looter?
They're helping protecting this
Keystone
vehicle.
Where'd
Cops.
the looter go?
They were
Okay, description. Black, white, Asian.
African Americans. They're
To show you how easily and quickly things can go wrong or can be misinterpreted.
Wow.
Christina.
Now they're pulling some
This
random
is one of
person
the
out their
wildest
car.
things I've ever seen. And then to see
now
that.
they're taking the woman from the car. She's not involved. She just stopped to look.
Okay.
I think she is with these people. And she came over to get her mom because she saw it on TV.
Well,
Oh, my God.
Maybe if they had a dozen more cops there, they could have sorted it all out.
It really is. I mean, it's just unbelievable. Like, it's where do they find these guys?
They're idiots.
This is the only problem we throw money at, like a hit.
Right.
And it does nothing.
Right.
Exactly.
No problem. And just
They don't listen. Calm down, lady. Well, maybe if you stopped and you spoke to her and you listened before you acted, we
Right.
wouldn't be in this mess.
They're rushing into a situation without any clue as to what's going on there.
Totally.
Calling from a 308 area code. Who's this? Where you calling from?
Hey, Sam, it's Kowalski.
Kowalski from Nebraska. What's happening, Kowalski?
Well, I called in to talk about the weather, but I think things are a little more urgent than that.
Fair enough.
Just wanted to let you know a little bit about some small town protests, like my town. A few people were protesting. Old college town I was part of, there was some protests going on there. Nothing major, like uproar or anything. Omaha and Lincoln, though, different story. Things are getting quite heated there, especially after a bar owner killed a supposed looter or rioter, or forget how I got worded, but yeah, that's pretty much a clusterfuck.
Right.
And social media is about as toxic as you can imagine.
I would imagine it's very toxic.
So apparently this is all because of George Soros, and this is a big distraction to stop us from Obamagate, and the COVID lie is no longer working. Like the most degenerate and vile things you could possibly think of. And I honestly can't believe the number of people that are actually posting this shit.
It's where there are two different realities in this country right now, and it is it runs the gamut from the way you interpret things like just basic facts that are happening within our politics to basic facts about a pandemic, right? I mean, how do you call this I don't even understand the mechanism for the COVID hoax, as it were.
I don't know how you can make a virus political any more than you can make police brutality a political issue. And, like the context of right v. left. Like, I understand the whole, context behind it. But, I mean, just like on its face value, conservatives aren't supposed to like, authoritarian states. And to be perfectly honest, the libertarians that are all about, individual freedom and whatnot, they've been pretty goddamn quiet during all of this. This is like literally government tyranny shit, the thing they're always talking about, and it's like nothing.
Right. Where's this is when the NRA is now, the NRA types are all coming out in support of the government that they say that they're worried about the tyranny. I mean, this is putting the lie to it, right? Like when we see these images of these guys showing up, and you can see random clips of like some dude coming down. He's dressed up in his camos and he comes down with his rifle to help out the cops, and they, let him go. But the whole point is, right, is these government tyranny. That's why we arm our citizens, not to shoot other citizens, supposedly.
Yeah, it's like tyranny from what? That's the military. That's the police right there. This is who you keep saying is going to take your guns, and you're on their side as they kill an unarmed, fellow citizen.
This isn't Killer Mike's whole argument.
Goddamn, like dog whistle. I'm not sure what is.
Right. Well, Kowalski, I will say this, and credit where credit's due. Justin Amash is introducing a bill supposedly to get rid of qualified immunity. Now, supposedly that question's also in front of the Supreme Court, and I can't find anything about that. I don't know how they resolved it, if they picked any of those cases, if they're still ongoing. I haven't seen anything about it, and I've been looking. But Justin Amash has put in legislation to that effect. There's also legislation to end the 1033 program that I think Brian Schatz is introducing. The 1033 program is where like leftover military equipment goes to cops so that they can have leftover military equipment. I don't know. And but hopefully,
If I could just end on a little bit of a conspiratorial note, or at least my thoughts of where Trump is going to go with this, because, you guys talked about like, where do you go from here? I think it's just going to be stoking, just the regular old fears. I think racism's going to start coming back into it much harder. The cities, are going to be definitely targeted as the root of all problems, and they're simply just going to keep trying to divide us along class lines. I legitimately see this resonating really well with people, because the vast majority of people are not going to look at this objectively and go, well, the police have been, they started this, they escalated it, and then, they're the only entire time. Like, nobody looks at it like that. For some reason, a target is more valuable than human life.
Yeah.
Like, I honestly think for a lot of people in, like, middle America, this is going to resonate well, that we need that law and order candidate like fucking Nixon.
I think it might resonate with his people, but well, I don't know, Kowalski. Maybe we should more of us should move to you. But hang in there, buddy.
All right,
tough times.
Stay safe, everyone. Bye.
Thanks, Kowalski. We got time for one more call. I think calling from a 281 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, Sam. It's Ed calling from New Mexico.
Ed from New Mexico. What's on your mind, Ed?
Well, it was kind of appropriate. The IM from somebody in New Mexico talking about the targeted communities, including indigenous. I grew up in Minneapolis, and when I was like 24, I got mistaken for a native man in the native neighborhood, and I was severely beaten by the police while handcuffed for no reason other than they figured that would be fine because I looked like native. And I think the indigenous community in Minnesota, in that area, is actually, from my experience, it seems to be the underpinning of the racism in Minnesota. And Matt could probably talk to this a little bit, but in a city where you have immigrants and African Americans, you don't have that generational history of what happened with the people who were originally occupying the land. But in Minnesota, you have that. You have people who have lived on farms for generations. In New Ulm, you have they have the cannons from the Indian War that they take out every year and shoot. And in Minneapolis, which is very kind of segregated by into like little ghettos. North Minneapolis is African American. Over on the east side, where I was, where I got assaulted by police, it's Native American area, and it's pretty close. It's within walking distance to Uptown. And in these years, it was actually I was just returning from New London. I was in the Coast Guard Academy when you were out there, actually.
Yeah.
And and I was in that time. Uptown was getting gentrified, and you had, people that would come in from, North Dakota, from outstate, and come into the Uptown, and they would see, poor Native people sometimes who would straggle, into the wrong neighborhood, and it was like a very bizarre sort of, because I grew up in Minnesota, but to return there after being out in Connecticut, where I'm Mediterranean, my dad's Italian. So in Connecticut, I'm just another, normal, whatever, another guy from out there. But in Minnesota at that time, that was odd. People really didn't know where I was coming from. So, I was in that strange crossover where Northern European people would be comfortable with their racism around me. And I was sort of in that category usually, but sometimes I'd be, like in this case, I got a ride from a friend, and his buddy was driving who happened to be Native, and I was living in the Native neighborhood. And I got in the truck. I didn't know the guy who was driving, and it turned out it was just a couple mile drive, about like 1 a.m. after bar, and he had been drinking too much. So he got pulled over in the neighborhood. He got pulled out of the car, out of the truck. I got pulled out. The cops were just rabid, and he handcuffed me. And at that time, I wasn't afraid of police at all. I had been in the military, and I was probably like the number one knucklehead cadet out there. We would go around in our uniforms, and we would get a break from police.
Yeah.
And so now suddenly I realize, I'm in a completely different situation, but I didn't realize it until I told the cop. He slammed me into the truck. He was rather muscular, slammed me into the truck. I had my shirt off. It was a really hot, muggy night, so I was just sitting in the pickup with the window open and had my shirt off. So, I was slammed into the truck, and I was, feeling rather violated. And I said, "No, don't jam your hands into my pockets." He was going to, patting me down. And before I finished saying it, he had just pulled out his flashlight, which he uses as a nightstick, and just as hard as he possibly could, started beating me on the back of the head.
Oh my God.
And I screamed. I wanted to scream to get attention, and I couldn't make a peep. Apparently it like shut down somehow my nervous system ability to make a sound. And just then, African American woman pulled up in a car, and she said, "I saw you do that. I'm going to report you. I'm going to report you. I got your license plate. I'm going to report you." They went over and talked to her, and she quietly drove away. So I'm thinking they intimidated her pretty severely. They threw me into a squad car. The other guy, the driver, he got, obviously he got arrested. And then my friend, who was sitting in the middle, blonde-haired, blue-eyed guy, got a ride home. I got taken to jail. They found a pot pipe in my pocket, an empty pot pipe, which in Minnesota, I went to the public defender and everything. It's not even an arrestable offense. It's like a fine. And took me to jail. And while I was there, they were just freaking out. They dragged me in. I had no shirt on, so it's like I'm kind of treated like an animal. And they went to fingerprint me, and the cop was so nervous for some reason. he was like, he couldn't get a good fingerprints off of me. And he tried like 3 times. He says, I don't know what you're doing. It's because his hands were shaking. He said, but, you know, if you don't cooperate, you know, there's going to be really big trouble. And they brought me into a room with like 6 cops. And the guy says, look, you're being a troublemaker. And you're going to find out how much pain we can inflict on you without leaving any marks. And all the cops, there was one African-American cop, and I glanced over to him, and he just had to put his eyes down. But it was obvious that they felt completely safe. There was no problem. As a matter of fact, when I was riding over in the squad car, you know, I was cocky young kid with a few beers in me, and I was like cursing out the cop that beat me in the head. I said, you know, I'm gonna turn you in. Your boss is gonna find out about this, and they just laughed about it. Like, he's like, yeah, you hear that? He says he's gonna tell my boss about it. I mean, it was so. And at that time, it was also in the news that a couple Native American men were picked up for like drunk in public, and they put them in the trunk of the car to take them to jail. So that's kind of, I think that's like the underpinning of whatever this, you know, demented, the way the guy just snapped and started just beating on me, it was like he just had so much rage. And I was like, at the time I was thinking, you know, is this guy on crack or what is going on? And I haven't really talked about this since then because, I mean, generally I enjoy white privilege, and it's kind of, you know, I have adoptive Native family and friends. I don't really feel, you know, like trying to stand up, and it's always felt kind of like it was not really my place. But now with what's been going on, you know, I posted on Facebook and I said, you know, I think I probably should speak out. This is really affecting me, what's going on. I'm not sure how to go about it. Maybe a letter to the editor or something. And I got a lot of encouragement from my friends. And somebody said this morning, you know, this is the second time I've seen this in like 20 minutes. Another person from Minnesota said, you know, that these old stories that they've never talked about. And it's really important to bring it out.
And this was what, about 30 years ago?
I mean, yeah, this is 1990.
Wow.
I'd say it was 1990. Yeah, so I was out there in Connecticut. I looked it up because I thought it was interesting. I've been listening to you since Air America days, but I never feel like calling in, and now I feel like I should be talking about this. But I was out there at that time, and then came to Minneapolis and was in an engineering program. I took a couple of years off, and my brother was in a punk rock band, and I was kind of hanging out, just, you know, goofing off. And it was an interesting time to see that palpable cultural difference. And I've just like recently been living in, I was working in Jersey City before coronavirus. Before that, I was in Houston.
Yeah.
And just looking at the difference in the way, you know, this is playing out in different parts of the country. It really does. I was working on the Minnesota Vikings Stadium in 2015. I was there for a year, and it was like a good refresher. I was like back into the same area where I grew up in a suburb, and I thought, no, I didn't have a chip on my shoulder. There really is something here. I mean, the people out in these suburbs, like I wouldn't see an African American for, you know, maybe 5 in a month.
Right.
But people would be talking about like the stuff that's on Fox News, like worrying about Black Lives Matter and I would say, like, why are you guys so sweating over? I don't even understand why you're so obsessed with this, because I don't even see African Americans around here.
Well, that reminds me of that story you were hearing.
It'd be a lot more though.
Yeah, you were hearing reports about, you know, when they were making they were trying to make the Caravan of the boogeyman back in the run up to the 2018 thing. You'd hear stories from folks, I think it was like in Michigan, or maybe it was Minnesota, actually. They're worried about their lake houses being taken over by members of the Caravan.
Yeah.
I mean, these type of things, there
you go.
Well,
because
listen,
the lake houses are out there where Native people live.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, so there's these scary people. When you're a good person out in your nice suburb, then you don't know what's going on with your lake home. There could be native people breaking in, and I really think this is ancestral heritage from what happened before. I mean, my neighbors, their grandfather, great grandfather came in and started the farm, and I mean, all this stuff happened.
Well, I'll tell you,
within their cultural memory.
I appreciate your sharing that story with us. And, I think it was Deep Roots was a book that talked about how some data folks could basically predict how a county, particularly they were looking at the South, would vote 100 to 200 years after the end of slavery. They could predict how they would vote based upon the ratio of slaves to white people in that county. And they could do it on a county by county level. And so this stuff runs really deep. I really appreciate the story, and thanks for calling in.
Should just point out the American Indian movement.
And I appreciate, that's why I really agree with what you said yesterday, was that this isn't something you can bring somebody to like a cultural awareness program for. We need laws to regulate these people.
Yep.
Yeah.
Appreciate the call.
The American...
Just real quick, can you recommend, I mean, I was going to write a letter to the editor in Minneapolis.
I would do that.
Other ideas how I could...
I would do that.
Does that make sense?
I would do that. And I would, frankly, I would write a letter to the editor, and I would sit down. I would write out your story. You'll do it with a letter to the editor, but I would write it out so it's tight. Call in local radio. Call into local radio out there and share it that way. Without a doubt.
Yeah. Okay.
Just make sure it's, you got to do it. You got to make it tight though for radio. They won't keep you on for that long. You got to be able to deliver that story in like 2.5 minutes, 3 minutes. And then, if they ask you more.
No, I'm actually working on it with a perfect, she's a writer who's helping me.
Great.
Lives in Minneapolis helping me with this. So that's a great advice. Thank you, Sam. You rock.
Appreciate the call.
I would mention that the American Indian movement started about 50 years ago in Minneapolis because of police brutality against Native Americans.
Wow. Well, those coasties, I would run into those guys occasionally. In the early days of my being in college, I was drinking a little much.
Coasties is also what they call people from the East Coast in the upper Midwest, too. So.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we would call the Coast Guard Academy guys coasties, and they would come on the campus in uniform. And I had just, particularly when I was our first year there, I had come from Worcester, where I was a relatively small guy relative to the guys I hung around with. And so I was a far less intimidated when I got to college. And, the drinking age was 18. And that was I think the only state in the country that it was 18. I think maybe DC and Connecticut were the last two states. And so I was legal for the first 9 months of college. It was not a good recipe, but I do remember getting into some situations with some of the coasties. But, all right. Great call. Folks, that's it for calls today. Appreciate it. We will be back tomorrow. And I don't know, we'll try and take more calls then. I know a lot of people are hanging on the line. Tried to get to as many as we could. Did pretty good with that, I think. Let's take a couple IMs. We didn't even get to the vigilantes running around Philadelphia, or what happened in Atlanta, where these two college students were basically tased in their car, or the Michigan police firing a gas canister into some unarmed man's face. It's unbelievable.
Is somebody do you guys know if there's a website that's basically compiling as much as possible so this is documented in one place?
There's a couple of threads on Twitter.
Well,
but yes,
something
it should be in
permanent.
something that is not so much of a stream, but as a resource, without a doubt. If people know about that, send us an email at majorityreporters@gmail.com, and we will spread that. Let's do a couple more IMs, and then we'll get out of here. Henry Kissinger, Vocal Fry. Look, guys, I'm surprised to still be here as you are. Pop Special. Hey, Sam, totally feel what you were saying about trying to do normal things in these times. Can't get any work done, but we need to keep doing it. What all you all at MR do is more important than ever. Can you say something about the blackout boxes that are going around on social media? Some people say it's real. Others says it's AstroTurf.
It started as a recording industry, like sort of how we can show solidarity type of thing. And then it metastasized into everybody using a black box and basically flooding the hashtags that people are using to monitor the protests with just black boxes. So it's some ill-advised activism from corporations.
Yeah, misguided.
And it's also just, I mean, not just the hashtags, but because like the algorithm works this way. Someone just sent me something on this to say it, that it pushes that up. So even people who are just casually on social media, who might be learning about things just through friends and family, all they're seeing is black boxes now. So, it's not helping expand the movement either.
It's like a Google bomb, the old Google bomb that we used to do. Snooze and Sarandon, downtown Cleveland and a few surrounding areas are on lockdown from Saturday evening until at least Friday. National Guard deployed. Feeling weird that I'm less scared of the National Guard than I am of the Cleveland cops.
Oh, man.
Incel the bed humper. Love the show. Did you see Nancy Pelosi holding a photo op, holding a Bible just like Donald Trump? I am just... I can't even. Biden went out there, gave a speech largely full of platitudes. There was, at least he signaled some support for, some legislative fixes. But, I mean, Congress has got to come back. Got to come back and just have presence in Washington so that there isn't this feeling like, mom and dad are gone and I can do whatever I want at the, in the house. I mean, obviously that's not exactly the dynamic, but for a long time, we were told that Donald Trump represents a danger to democracy. Right. And I don't know how you can look at what he did yesterday and what he's instructing and encouraging police departments to do, and frankly, the military to do.
Can we
and governors
impeach him again?
To do. I don't know how you can see that and not think that we are at the closest point. If you think any of that was ever real, that we are at the closest point for that to be a problem. Now, it may increase as time goes on. But this is the way, and I'm not saying this is happening, but I'm just saying, I've said this at different points throughout his time in office. We're not necessarily headed towards fascism, authoritarianism, or whatnot. But if we were, these are the steps we would have to go through. Like there are off ramps from here to there, but we're on a trajectory now that's not very healthy, and it would be a good thing to have the physical presence of lawmakers in Washington, Congress people, to bear some witness to what's going on here. I mean, had a congressperson been with that crowd in Washington, D.C., in this peaceful protest, I mean, you saw the implications of just having an MSNBC reporter there. But if there was a congressperson there in that crowd, or multiple congresspeople in that crowd who are getting fired on by flashbangs, that's going to make a big, big difference for the American people. So the idea that Nancy Pelosi thinks it's sufficient enough to just mock Donald Trump with the way he holds a Bible, and that's supposed to be some type of signal to people, I'm sorry, that is not sufficient. Right. That is almost criminally insufficient. If you're going to be an opposition party, if you're going to be the leader of that party, you get your ass to Washington, D.C., because what's going on there is highly, highly problematic, and that is an understatement. I mean, it really is just a stunning abdication of leadership. And I don't care what the strategy is. You can go there and just be there, and your presence is enough if you're so terrified for saying a word that you think is going to cost you some type of, seat in some type of purple district. But if anything that you're saying has any meaning whatsoever, you got to get to Washington. It really is just a complete abdication and a lack of defense of democracy. I mean, they attacked peaceful protesters yesterday so that Donald Trump could have a photo op after he said that he's going to bring in the military. They send out Milley to go surveil Washington, D.C. as if it's some type of occupied territory. Congress needs to be back in session. There needs to be Congress people in Washington, D.C. now. It really is just stunning.
And even, I mean, for those who are more progressive in Congress that aren't in purple seats, the least you could do, and we know you're our allies as a movement, not just Black Lives Matter allies, but movement allies, speak up. Call for Nancy Pelosi to call session. Like, that is the least you could do. There are so many ways to push against the power right now. So many different ways. Because if you're not, you're bystanders. I mean, that is literally where we are. If you can't stand up in literally the worst moment, if you are willing to take the courage to call for impeachment and go through impeachment 7 months ago, 6 months ago, then you should be willing to at least say we can show up to session and show whatever solidarity we can at this moment of crisis.
I mean, somebody should be embarrassing, even if it's just by juxtaposition.
Yes.
The actions of the Republican Senate, which is now just basically pushing for hell bent to get past 200 federal judges now that they've appointed. I mean, confirmed and sat. So around 198 now, I think, or something. And you got Lindsey Graham calling for older justices to sit down. And meanwhile, there's no Democratic leadership in Washington. The entire caucus should be back there. Even if it's just to sit out on that mall and challenge these cops and these military to fire flashbangs in their direction. I mean, it really is just...
I want to see the Democrats who voted against the military budget show up.
At the very least.
Because I think that's what this comes down to. The defense budget, the police budget, we know where the lines are even with our progressives that are in office. But there are a few of you who have stepped up. That's the least we could do.
Least. A couple more IMs and we'll get out of here. Noah from Tampa, I think you can synthesize Black Lives Matter movement and tie it into the greater fight for social democracy is to tie in the militarization of the police to the militarization overseas. Some line like the weapon that kills an Iraqi child could kill you too. I think it was Martin Luther King said every bomb that drops in Vietnam falls in the inner city in this country, something to that effect. Dr. Chaos MD, I went out to the protest in Portland last night sporting my Left is Best shirt and MR mask. It's very peaceful and positive, likely due to the fact that all the cops are barricaded blocks away. Thank you for reading my IM yesterday and your kind words. It's helpful for me in living up to who I want to be and what I want to represent. Solidarity to all who oppose fascism, racism, and oppression. See you out there again tonight. Left is Best. Congressional baseball fan, really starting to worry that we might not be getting any kind of baseball in June. This whole virus thing will surely blow over in July. So we can at least have a home run derby. I mean, seeing the Trump administration said this would be all over by the end of April, and then they said by the end of May. So it stands to reason they'll get it right this time. And it'll all be over by the end of June. Sure. Anthony Caldefanthil, Sam, we're putting you in charge of building a new model for society on a hill in East LA and the new America. Know-it-all car surgeon, that guy pulling out his rifle to use it a way of controlling the crowd is the very reason I've changed my position on the Second Amendment. I'm for gun ownership. This archaic amendment is more of a cult ideology than a civil right. Senator Pug, liberal unions are too chicken to pressure the AFL-CIO. In my own union, one of our field reps hides behind members' calls for us to stand against police brutality and call out the cop unions. Oh, well, we have conservative members of our union, too. Unions aren't supposed to get political. It's maddening. That's absurd. All right, the final IM of the day. Regarding brick pallets, ain't you ever heard of loot boxes? All right, folks. Nomi, thanks so much. Folks, check out Nomi's show, Nomiki Konst, on YouTube and the Nomiki show on patreon.com.
Right. Thank you.
At Brendan, thanks for today. See you folks tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the lie.